Hey, welcome everybody to Adventure Stories, episode 1. We are coming right out of the gate here with a cool opportunity to talk to someone who is new to Adventure Church. Chase MacDonald. She started coming back in November, and then after the first of the year, went through our starting point class and joined the church, became an official ministry partner here at Adventure. And Chase has got a pretty unique perspective on what's going on in the world right now. Chase is an ICU nurse in the Norton Healthcare system, and is on the front lines of battling this coronavirus, this COVID-19 pandemic. And so today, I just wanted to give her the opportunity to share with our church, one, a little bit about herself and how she came to be at Adventure, but two, really what's going on behind the scenes and what's going on inside the hospitals, in the trenches, in those things that we can't see, and in places where honestly people are not allowed to go. She's going to be able to give us, and she does give us, some insight in what's happening, but also how we as a church can be praying for doctors and nurses and hospital staffs, but also ways for people to get involved in serving these people in the healthcare community who are fighting this up close and personal. So, hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Chase. You have an opportunity to get to know her, put a face and a name together, or if you're listening on the podcast, the audio version, you can put the sound of a voice and a name together. But enjoy Adventure Stories episode 1. All right, so hey Chase, you are you're number one, like you're first one up. We're trying this whole new thing where we're just telling the stories of people here at Adventure, specifically people in this case that are, dealing with this whole coronavirus thing in ways that maybe not everybody has to deal with. But before we get into all that, you are pretty new to the church, so tell us a little bit about who you are, how you came to be at Adventure, and what you do.
Okay, so I was born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina, but my parents were both born and raised in Lexington, so they had, had this long-term goal of getting back to Kentucky. Unfortunately, that fell when I was 15, so I made a big move at 15 to Crestwood, Kentucky, and had the most awesome opportunity to have Miss Mac, or Christy, as most of you know her. I just can't call her Christy. So she taught my AP Bio class my sophomore year and was one of my favorite people in the whole wide world. And then our relationship grew, and she invested in me. I took every class she had to offer every year I was in high school. And probably one of the, if not the most influential people in my life. She probably had no idea. But, as a high school girl, you go through a lot of struggles, and just having her, we didn't even have to have any serious or intellectual conversations, although we did have some of those. Just having her as a person and being around her and her energy made a huge impact on me as a teenage girl. So fortunately, after I graduated high school, continued that relationship, was blessed to be able to watch over the McMahon boys, who are just crazy and lovely. And they were much smaller when I had them. I think Jack was 2, turned 3 that summer, and Cash was 4 to 7 months or something like that.
He's a little dude.
He was a little baby. He was a chunk, though. Don't get me wrong. My muscles grew that summer. So that was a great opportunity and experience for me. I learned a lot in that. And then that next summer, well, no, I guess it was the summer in between my freshman and sophomore year of college. So I went to Northern Kentucky University for nursing school. And then that summer between freshman and sophomore years, when I nannied the boys. And then I went back to school sophomore year and kind of went down a rabbit hole a little bit. Wasn't as involved in church while I was in school as much as I should have been, or I attempted to be, but spiritually, I guess my personal spiritual life, I wasn't growing. It kind of halted a little bit, not obviously on God's part, on mine. Just was making some poor choices, not living according to his will. So my relationship with the Max kind of fell out a little bit as I was pursuing things, worldly things. So I didn't want that accountability on my life. I didn't want that wisdom. I didn't want to hear it. So kind of fell out of that relationship, and then made a huge life change. Well, so I graduated NKU nursing school in May of 2018, and then moved back here to Louisville, and started working in the ICU at Norton Hospital, and have loved every minute of it. And then was kind of that first year of nursing, I was working night shift. I was pretty miserable with every aspect of my life. And then I switched over to day shift, which was a life changer because my depression was just really seeping in on night shift. I needed sunshine badly. So switching to day shift was awesome. It kind of rocked my world, changed my perspective on a lot of things, and made a big life change November of last year, and decided I needed to get plugged in somewhere. I was going to church, kind of church hopping, not personally really pursuing my relationship with Christ. And I decided now's the time to dive back in. So I had heard that Brad had accepted this senior pastor position at Adventure. I had never heard of the church. I didn't know where it was. But I was like, that's really cool because, he's worked in student ministry for a long time. I wasn't one of his students. I actually was really involved in another church, River Valley, who is now part of Southeast, which is super cool. But anyway, so I was like, well, I want to check it out. I want to see what it's all about. It would be so fun to just show up one Sunday and surprise them and say, hi, hello, remember me from several years back? And so I went on my Google Maps, looked up where this church was, and it was 5 minutes away from me. Wow, this is a God thing. So I go up one Sunday, Brad's standing at the door, and I'm like, oh, hello. And so that was kind of fun. And I got to see Miss Mac for the first time in several years. So pretty immediately, I felt like this is where I needed to be. And I think probably one of the things about this community of believers that has resonated with my heart so heavily is the whole bringing my mess. And I'm sorry if you hear my cat over here, he may jump up. He wants to be involved too. So my life's pretty messy these days. I've dealt with a lot of hardships, personally and family things, and my life's pretty messy. So a lot of times, especially, I grew up in church, and everybody just always seemed to have it so together, and you couldn't go in and be in shambles. You had to put on this front, and then you're at home and you're in shambles and you're facing that on your own. And so I really appreciate that aspect of our belief of bringing the mess and being there for each other, getting in the pit with each other. So that's where I am, and I'm really excited. I just recently kind of connected with Justin with student ministry and trying to get plugged in there and get to know the students. Unfortunately, timing is kind of stinky because I'm having to meet them over, video chat, but it is what it is. We're getting through it. But I'm excited to get plugged in that area of investing and building relationships and things like that. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Who I am, what I do. I already told you who I am, kind of what I do as an ICU nurse.
And in most hospitals at this point, like you're saying, the elective stuff is done. Like we're not doing that, but we're kind of shifting over to prepare for or already taking in patients that are dealing with COVID-19, the coronavirus when it gets in and starts to go haywire. So tell us a little bit about like what you're seeing, in the hospital, because you get to see what we don't get to see, right? At this point, like they're not really even letting people into hospitals. So what are the kinds of things that you're seeing on the front lines of this kind of war with the coronavirus and where that and humanity meet?
And things are changing daily. I mean, we're having to reevaluate and be flexible and do the best thing that we can to to protect ourselves and protect them. So in the last couple of weeks, we have had all of our COVID-19 or coronavirus patients that are either in rule out or like a specimen has been sent and we're waiting on that result. Obviously, in that case, we still keep them in isolation, just to in case they're positive. So until that test comes back negative, they remain in isolation. So those patients go up to the 5th floor. So even if they're on the 3rd floor, they're there for something else, all of a sudden they're exhibiting signs and symptoms of this virus, they will move that patient to the 5th floor to kind of just help contain it a little bit. So like last week we had, I don't know, maybe 4. This week, our entire unit on the 5th floor is full.
Wow.
I think last night when I left, we had 3 beds left. And of those 21 rooms, or I should say, let's say we had 17 patients, 15 of them were intubated. So they were on a ventilator, breathing tube for respiratory support. So it jumped real quick in a week. It was rough. Yesterday was rough because, like I said, last week, we didn't see a dire decrease or need for ventilators. Last night, one of our respiratory therapists came up and said, we're down to 1 downstairs in our supply room, and that's scary. Now, we do have a few extra in other parts of the building, but to only have 1 in their supply room when they would have maybe 20 usually is really scary. Because not only, the COVID-19 patients are on a ventilator, there are other patients for other reasons that are on them.
Right,
but,
yeah.
Obviously, the majority of our COVID-19 patients are on them or end up on them. I don't think I've seen any patient that has tested positive that have come through our unit that has not been on the ventilator at one point. So patients who come in, they test positive, they're doing okay respiratory wise, but their numbers are starting to trend in a certain direction. We will go ahead and electively, instead of waiting until it's emergent, we will electively intubate early so that it can improve their ultimate outcome, because we've seen research on that. So that has been really different for all of us because, 9 times out of 10, we're not going to intubate a patient until it's dire, until they're unresponsive, until there's no chance of recovery here. We have to do it. So now we're having these conversations with patients, and young patients too, in their 40s, and it blows my mind going in and having to have that conversation of, hey, this is going to get bad. So this is what we want to do before it gets bad, because we think that, or research has shown that if we do this now, your outcome is better. So, and that's a really, especially the majority, 90% of these patients that are getting so sick were completely healthy adults before this. So not on any medications, no past medical history, never smoked, never drank, nothing. And they get this virus. And for some reason, it chose to affect this person as badly as it did. So we go in, we have this conversation with someone who's like you and me, alert oriented, knows what's going on. And I can't imagine, if someone were to come to me and say, hey, we're going to do this. It's just absolutely terrifying. And obviously they're not awake. We're going to sedate them and put them to sleep so that they're not aware of what's happening. But another really difficult piece of that is they have no one there with them. Mm-hmm. So we are not allowing any visitors, no exceptions. Your family member, your husband of 40 who, you've got 3 little kids at home, you can't be there when he's dying, and it's traumatic for everybody. Mm-hmm. So, we had a patient who was in her 40s, and we had that conversation. She wanted to call her husband, and she didn't want to do it. She was so scared, and he just begged her, was like, please, So they ended up doing it, and as far as I know, she's doing okay. But anyway, so that's been really different. So I guess my point to this is people that aren't visually seeing it, uh, you just have no idea. You have no idea. And some people are getting it, even some of my coworkers, and they're fine. And they have, a case of the flu or something comparable. They stay home, they drink fluids, and, they get better and then they go back to work. So I've had, friends and coworkers and even physicians that have contracted it and they've been okay. But like I said, it's very strange because there's nothing that tells us that this patient's going to have a better outcome than this one.
Mm-hmm.
Or this patient has all of these other things that they're going through. They're diabetic, they've got heart disease, all of these other things. That patient could do a lot better than the patient with no medical history. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And obviously there's a lot of research that's going into this. And I think probably we're going to learn that there's a genetic piece of this. But that's why it's so important that even if you think, and I feel like the majority of us are this way, we just feel exempt to everything. We think we're going to get on this plane and it's going to get to point B, or we're going to get in this car and that drunk driver is not going to run that red light and hit me. Maybe my buddy next door, but not me. So we feel like it's not going to affect me. I'm fine. My family's fine. Nobody's sick. Nobody's old, but that doesn't matter. This virus is not selective and doesn't pick and choose who's going to get it and who's not. So, it's so important to take the proper precautions and protect yourself and your family, because it's no joke. It's the real deal.
So what are like some of the, as a healthcare worker, right, as someone in the healthcare profession, what are some of the biggest needs? What are some of the biggest fears? What are some of the biggest challenges that you all are facing, right? That's question one. And then question two, like what are some ways that people like the rest of us that are not in the trenches, so to speak, how can we, be praying for people that are doing like what you're doing? So what are those fears? What are those challenges? What are those needs that you feel like, man, these are the things that we're running into? And then how can we pray for people that are doing what you're doing?
Absolutely. So it's definitely scary. We are preparing for not having enough protective equipment, PPE as we're calling it. So we're reusing a lot of the same things, and that's a little bit scary because in a normal circumstance, every time we leave a patient room, we take our mask off and we put a new one on the next time we go in. So in this case, we're wearing the same mask room to room. We don't take it off all day. And so we walk in the doors of the hospital, we're given a mask. We're told not to leave that area until we have put our mask on. That mask stays on all day. Of course, if you go to the bathroom or you're eating, you can take it off. I have to take hourly, if it's possible. Sometimes it's not feasible. I have to take hourly, I'm calling them breath breaks, because I feel like I'm suffocating in this mask.
Yeah,
and I'm
yeah.
grateful to have it and have that protection, but it is suffocating. So I have to go to the break room or the bathroom, take it off, take some deep breaths, throw it back on, and get back to it. So with my patients that are COVID positive, we're wearing N95 respirators in that room, but we're reusing them. So we take off our surgical mask or just regular face mask. We put on our N95, like a respirator mask. It has more of a protective layer, I guess is the right way to say it. And so we go in, we do our duty, we come out, we take it off, we're putting them in brown bags, put in a brown bag, take out our face mask, put it back on. So, and we're using those same masks all day long. And then our N95s, our respirator masks, we are cleaning. They're using like a UV cleaning system to clean those masks at the end of the day. When you come back the next day, you're using that same mask. So that's kind of scary. And like I said, I mean, at this point, I'm not even really that concerned about getting the virus myself. Maybe I should be a little more worried. I don't know. But I think honestly, the scariest part about contracting it is having to be locked in my house by myself for 14 days. And a lot of our coworkers are the same way. So we live alone. We may have a cat or something to keep us company. But being locked in the house and not having the opportunity to, I mean, even go to the grocery store. I mean, we can't open our front door. That's just, it's matter of fact. And
Wow.
that is not exciting to think about. Which, granted, I mean, people that aren't going to work, I cannot imagine. I'm grateful that I get to leave my house and go and be around my people and have some sort of interaction, even though we're having to stand apart from each other. We can't really see each other's faces, but at least we can hear voices. We can feel that we're not completely alone. So I feel for y'all that are home, and especially, your only companionship is your children that are about to send you, over the edge. So I feel for you for sure. But the thought of not even being able to drive to the grocery store and even have somebody bring your groceries to your car, like, just that is some sort of movement. So that's honestly probably the thing I'm most scared about, is being locked in this house for
Yeah.
an extended period of time. I mean, prayers are just overwhelmingly coveted these days, just for us to, one of my greatest prayers, which I was talking to Miss Mac about earlier, is just being able to sleep before I go to work. I cannot sleep because I'm just so anxious, and then I get to work and I'm tired, and I feel like I can't adequately care for my patients, with all the energy that I need to use, or I'll give every ounce of myself and I come home and I'm just done. I have nothing left. So I think a lot of us are feeling that, just driving to work and feeling so anxious about what's today going to look like. What am I going to be exposed to? Am I going to start feeling symptoms tomorrow? I mean, it's just a lot of anxiety that's covering this. Other ways are just honestly for patient outcomes, because especially as ICU nurses, it sounds really heartless or like not compassionate, because we deal with death pretty well. We have to, so we can't lose it. We can't cry and break down every time we have a patient death. Absolutely, it's not like we're excited about it. No one's happy about it,
Right.
but we're, for the most part, able to manage very well with that. And certainly there are exceptions. There are patients that are going to hit a little harder. So we're all doing okay right now. I think we're all going to come to a point where we're going to break, and it's going to be, we're just going to have to lose it for a minute, and that's okay. But we need some good patient outcomes. We need some patients to recover. We need that hope, because if we're losing them all, it feels pointless. It feels defeating.
Mm.
And obviously we care so much. I mean, nobody doesn't care about their patient. We want them to get better. We want them to survive. That's why we do what we do. I don't know what word I want to use, but in talking to family members on the phone, that's been really difficult,
Mm.
because we want that family to be involved. We want them to be there at the bedside and hold hands. And I spend the majority of my day in my patient rooms. So I don't like for them to be alone. I don't like the thought of me being alone on a ventilator, sedated, and they're restrained. Their arms are tied to the bed and they're just laying there by themselves. That makes me really sad. So I do my best. I'll like turn on some music or turn the TV on or talk to them, or, even though, they probably are not hearing me, because we are having to keep them as sedated as possible to kind of minimize their work, the work that they're having to do to stay alive. But it makes me feel better anyway, that I feel like I'm trying to like be comforting. So I'll chart in the room. I feel like as a daughter, if that was my mom and I couldn't be there, that would be grueling. I mean, just heart wrenching. So it's difficult to have those conversations with family members, especially when their loved one isn't improving and we're having to tell them, this is what we're doing. We're doing our best, but it's not looking good. And then you have to have those conversations of, listen, this is imminent. Your loved one is not going to survive this. So you have to have the conversation of, would you like for us to resuscitate them in
Mm.
an attempt to keep them alive if their heart were to stop, or would you like for us to make them comfortable? And that's probably one of the hardest conversations to have. So just giving us strength, giving us the wisdom, the words to use in those situations, giving the families comfort. There's a lot of prayer that needs to happen these days. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So tell us, like, I know, because a lot of us, we're looking for ways. A lot of people are looking for ways to help, things that they can do. So, is there anything that the church can do? Is there anything that people can do that will, like, directly encourage or show healthcare workers that they're loved? That we are cheering you all on, right? Are there any tangible things that we can do, right? That the church can do?
So kind of intangible, going back to the whole prayer thing, encouragement thing, is I cannot stress how encouraging and grateful I have been to have so many of my family, my friends. Miss Mac texts me, I don't know, once a day or once every other day. She's got enough to deal with, but I'm still on her mind. And the minute she thinks of me, she texts me. And it means the world to me. And some of my cousins that I haven't talked to in a year, they're texting me, checking on me. And that means more than anything, that you're thinking of me and you want to see how I'm doing. So my suggestion would be, it doesn't matter if your loved one is a healthcare worker, if they're working at Walmart, if they're staying at home with their kids. If God put someone on your heart, on your mind, text them or call them immediately. Don't say, "Oh, I'm going to text Brad later because I'm thinking of him." No, you're not going to do it because you're going to get distracted and you're going to forget about it. Text them, write them, because there's a reason that God put them on your heart and they need that text. They need that prayer. And I would also encourage, when you receive that text, don't say, "Oh yeah, we're doing fine, things are good," because they're not. You're frustrated, you're annoyed, you need to let it out. And you're both in that same spot. So like if Brad texts me and says, "How are you doing?" and I say, "I'm good, how are you?" and he says, "I'm good." That does nothing for anybody, in my opinion. I want to say, "I'm falling apart. I am struggling." And I want you to say, "Me too, man. This is what I'm facing today. This is my heart today." Like that's what we need, is that transparency, that just honesty of, we're struggling. And that's what we need, is to be there for each other and just let it out and say, "Jack is about to drive me up the wall today. And I really just want to, take him to a spot and drop him off," because they're probably saying the same thing about their kid. And probably it's not Jack, it's Cash, but that's aside from the point.
You're exactly right.
You know, so transparency is huge. The amount of food that people have been bringing to the hospital has been awesome. We're not having to pack our lunches. We're not having to cook when we get home because there's food always. We're getting free lunches from the cafeteria, which is great. There's people that are bringing donuts or cookies or sandwiches or whatever it may be. And that is huge because people are thinking of us. They're sacrificing a lot of money. I mean, that's not cheap to provide Jimmy John's for 20 nurses. It's awesome to see that heart of service from other people. So if that's on your heart and you said, "I want to bring Chick-fil-A one day," or "I want to bring this," or, whatever, let me know. And I can either get you in touch with another facility, or for us, I don't want it all to come to ICU. We need to spread the love. But that's been really cool. That's been fun. So another thing that has been really, really awesome, I'm loving, is, like I was saying before, we're wearing masks 24/7 while we're at the hospital, which our shifts can be anywhere from 13 to 16 hours. So it's a long time to have something rubbing on your nose, rubbing on your ears. So the ears has been the biggest thing. So just rubbing right here, it's really causing our ears to be really irritated. So a lot of people have been making these headbands, and they are so neat, which I probably shouldn't even say this because we probably have a lot, but there may be other areas that need some. These just little elastic headbands, you girls know what I'm talking about. And they're sewing buttons like right here. And then so when we put our masks on, we can tie them to the buttons so they're not rubbing on our ears, which has been awesome. We love that. So if anybody's crafty or has some extra stuff or time and wants to make those, that's awesome.
So the way to do that then, if like somebody wanted to bring lunch by one day for
Sure.
ICU nurses, like we don't just pull up in the parking lot and
Right.
like, "Hey, here you go." Like, what's is it, do we contact the hospital and say, we've got it, someone at front desk comes and gets it, right? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so you can call the hospital if you guys live, closer to downtown or closer to Norton Women's and Children's or Audubon or whatever facility you feel like you would like to donate to. Doesn't have to be mine. You can just call, Google the number, call them up, say, hey, I have food for your ICU today, or I have food for your ER nurses or your floor nurses or whatever. If you could have security come out and grab it, and they'll come out, they'll get it, and they'll deliver it for you.
Cool. Where or how have you been seeing Jesus in all of this? Like, what's that look like?
There have been a lot of points of time in my life where I've been mad at God unfairly, sure, because he's good. He's always good. But I've been mad, like really mad, and feeling like I don't deserve this. You're being unfair to me.
Join the club. Yep.
Why are you making me go through this? Why did you have this person die? Or why did you do this? And I think more so than any time in my life, in the past 6 months, even prior to this, I have felt his sovereignty more than anything. And I cannot control anything. And I am a control freak. I want to be in control of every single aspect of everything. So releasing that control, which I'm still working on, not good at it, by the way, just yet. But releasing that control has been just a huge weight release for me, and knowing I cannot control this virus. I can't control who's going to be affected, what the outcome's going to be. He's got it. I don't want it. I don't want it in my hands. I thank you, God, that I don't have to decide that. So he's sovereign, and that's all I can say to myself over and over is he's good. He's in control. He's sovereign. He has this. So I've taken a lot of peace and comfort in that, and I haven't been mad, and I haven't been questioning him during this, which is kind of surprising, especially for me. So that's that's the only way I can get through it, is just to say it's not on me. I can't say what's going to happen, and I just have to trust that he's got this, and we're going to get through it, and the world is not going to end. And if it does, great, Lord, please come. Just save us all. Let's just go be with you, because I think we're all about there right now. So there were a couple of verses that I immediately thought of when preparing for this, which I am an extremely anxious person. I mean, just at baseline, just an anxious person. So during this time, it's been hard to manage. Thought of this verse in Proverbs, which is super simple and sweet, but at the same time, I feel like it's really heavy and relevant at this point. And it's Proverbs 12:25, and it says, "Anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down." Just that first part, just you feel it. It is heavy. But a good word makes him glad. So that kind of seems like flippant to me when I read that. A good word makes him glad. But when I think about it more, first of all, his good word makes me glad, right? Because, like I said, he's sovereign, he's in control, he has this, and I don't have to worry about it. Secondly, talking about encouragement. So when I receive encouragement, or we're encouraging each other, that is lifting weight off. That's just slowly, and maybe it's just a little pinch, but it makes a difference. And so encouragement is huge at this point, because we're all feeling pretty heavy. So the crowd that met Jesus in Jerusalem, they had the branches of palm trees, and they went out and they're like praising him. And it's this kind of party idea of everyone's so joyful and happy, and oh, the Lord's here, and they're praising him and having a great time. And then things seem so up and joyful and happy, and then the next week it's like grim, and it's rough, and Jesus is anxious and he's struggling. We can kind of relate to that of, things may have been good before, right now they're not good. And we can relate to that with Jesus of feeling heavy and feeling anxious and feeling unsure. And at the end, though, there's a silver lining, right? Because he saved the world and he rose again. So he was kind of talking about how we're not alone in this, and that Jesus experienced this too. And obviously it's not the same situation, but I really appreciated that and loved that kind of comparison there. So the next, John 12:12, the next day, the large crowd that had come to the feast heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem. So they took branches of palm trees and went out to meet him, crying, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, even the King of Israel. And Jesus found a young donkey and sat on it, just as it is written, fear not, daughter of Zion. Behold, your king is coming, sitting on a donkey's colt. So that, if for those that are theological or may not know, is a reference to Zephaniah 9:9. So that was kind of the prophecy of Jesus coming and sitting on the donkey, which I always love that connection of prophecy to reality. So then that's in John 12:12. And then you look down in John 12, verse 27, and it says, now is my soul troubled. And what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this purpose, I have come to this hour. Father, glorify your name. Then a voice from heaven, I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again. So Jesus is crying out to God and saying, God, please don't make me do this. I don't want to do this, but I know this is what you sent me here to do. So I feel like that's kind of how all of us are feeling, like, God, don't make me go to work. Don't make me do this. I don't want to do it, but this is what you made me for. This is what you called me to do. This is my purpose, and I'm serving you in this. So there is going to be a silver lining. We're all going to rise up. God's going to protect us, and we're going to get through it. So right now we're kind of just sitting in that don't make me do it, God. So.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I think and we talked a little bit about this on Sunday, we've all got these limit moments, right? Every human being has got these moments where it's like, if I push any further, or if you push me any further, or if you make me go any further, I'm going to break, right? And so in those moments, we look to find our way out when we get pushed up against those limits, right? And Jesus is the same way. He's a human, right? Like Hebrews 4 talks about, he's just like us, right? He's tempted and tested in the same ways that we are, yet he doesn't sin, right? That's the big difference between Jesus and us. But in the sense that, like, we do get pushed up against those moments, and when we get pushed up against those moments, we have this internal dialogue that says, can I do this? What's the worst that would happen if I don't? And then we go, like, is it even worth it, right? That Jesus had those same conversations, like you're saying, of going, man, I don't want to do this. I don't know if I can do this. But on the what we talked about on Sunday is ultimately, when the fight's staring him directly in the face, he chooses to see beyond it, right? And see what's around that fight and what's through that fight, because he has hope that his father is going to do what he said he was going to do, right? And that 3 days later he was going to be brought to life, and so I think that's really cool. And so I just want to say thanks, number one, for just sharing your heart and telling us a little bit more about who you are, what you're dealing with, what people at the hospital, what they're walking through, and how we can, as just regular people, help with that, whether it's sewing those little headbands, or bringing food by, or just praying for like you said, you to have the words, because you're the one that's talking to family, right? It's that person in that bed can't talk because they're asleep and have a tube down their throat, right? So you're the one having to communicate to family, which means you need that wisdom and those words to comfort, but also speak truth and those kinds of things. So Chase, I just want to say thanks, number one, for being awesome, and number two, for spending a little bit of time on your day off of all days, right? Because you're going right back in to the fight tomorrow, right? Like that's where you're headed. So thank you for hanging out with us. Thanks for sharing your heart with us. Thanks for letting us get to know you a little bit, and for letting us know how we can dive into this and support people like you, but also support you because you're part of the family, right? Hey, thanks for tuning in today for episode 1 of Adventure Stories. And hopefully that conversation with Chase was insightful and gave you the opportunity to figure out, how you can help, but also really what's going on within the lives of people that are working in healthcare right now. Excited for next week. Next week, Bridget Morgan is going to join us on Adventure Stories. She and her husband, Justin, and their daughter, Cora, joined Adventure. They became partners years of adventure right after the first of this year in 2020. Bridget is a marriage and family therapist, and so we're going to be able to pick her brain a little bit on how do we as parents, if we have kids, effectively parent in this time. What's going on in the lives of our kids that maybe we don't see? And then really, I think an important question is, what about our kids maybe do we not know, right now that maybe would be helpful for us to know? And if you are, maybe your kids are older and they moved out of the house, or you're single and kind of going through this, riding this wave alone, how do we effectively manage the isolation that's happening here? If we don't have a house full of just at least in our house, like a 3-ring circus, how do we manage the isolation? How do we manage the feeling of aloneness? Because social distancing does not mean isolation. So what does that look like for us? So excited for that conversation. Hopefully you'll join us next Tuesday for more adventure stories.